this was the last slide which you saw, right? Inverse homomorphism. And you have not seen this slide.
No, we haven't seen this slide. No.
Okay, so let's restart from construction of finite automata for inverse homomorphic image. Okay, so we are given a DFA for the language L, okay, which is defined on tau star, please remember. And to construct a DFA for the inverse homomorphic image, what we have to do is we have to keep on the exact same set of states, the same start state, same final state. This is very important. The set of states, start state, final state, these are not changing. Okay, the input alphabet is obviously different. Okay, previously it was on tau star. The one DFA we have been given, it's on tau, and we have to have a resultant DFA which is on sigma, because the H is defined on sigma. Okay, and the transactions are computed by applying H to an input symbol A and seeing where A would go on the sequence of input symbols in HA. Okay, so we'll see what this means. Its formal definition is also given here. Now let's take this example. This is the example that I was discussing when we lost connection. Okay, so the language is the one which we have been working with, which you have actually listed the strings for. Okay, so that is AB plus BA whole star A. And this is the minimized DFA. Can you all see the minimized DFA?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so now it is clear. So there are three states here, A, B and C. You can see that A is the initial state, C is the final state, and this is the minimized DFA for which accepts this language L. And we have defined a homomorphism. This is the one we were working with on 0 and 1. That's sigma on which homomorphism is defined as 0, 1, and tau is AB. Okay, so the homomorphism is the one shown. This is again what we have seen before. Now what we do is we take each of these. Now remember, in the finite automata which we construct, the set of states, initial state, final state, they all remain the same. So you can see on the right that we have kept them all the same. Okay. If you can't hear me, please inform me immediately. So here on the right, you can see that we have kept the states the same. Can you still see my slides?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, you are muted again.
Ma'am, you're on mute, ma'am.
I don't know. Is it somebody playing tricks or somebody? I'm not muting myself. Who is muting? This is very frustrating, very disturbing, in fact. Now, what happens is you can still see my slides, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So what we'll do is we'll start with each state, say A, and try to run the string AA and ABA and see where we land up. If we try to run AA from A here, this set here, we see that we cannot go to any state. But if we run ABA, follow my cursor pointer, you go to C, then back to A, and then to C again for ABA. Okay, and ABA means you are actually seeing a 1 in the previous language. So if you can go from A to C on ABA, it means you should be able to go from A to C on 1. Okay, so we add a transition on 1 from A to C. Is this clear how we have got this transition? So what we are going to do now is take each of the states. Now let's take state B and state C and see where we go on running the string AA and ABA. Now from B you can see, okay, if we start from B and we run AA, A, so we go to C, okay, and A is the homomorphic image of 0. So from B to C, we have a transition on 0. From B, if we run ABA, where do we go? ABA. So we go to A. Okay. So from B to C, we add a transition
Ma'am, you're not. I'm on mute again, ma'am.
So try with the state C. Where do we go from C on AA? There's no way where we can go. Okay, so there's no transition out from C on AA on 0, and ABA also there is no place where we can go from C, right? So there are no outgoing transitions from C on ABA. So the finite automata which we obtain by applying this construction which we saw in the previous slide is this finite automata. Okay,
Ma'am,
and if
how
you
are you
look
arriving at
closely,
0, ma'am? How are
pardon?
you arriving at, ma'am, how are you arriving at the 0 transition?
See, from B, you try
Yes,
to
ma'am.
run these two strings, AA. From B, if
Yes.
you run AA, where do you go? You
Ma'am,
go to C, right?
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Okay,
and
okay,
the
okay, ma'am.
inverse homomorphic image of AA is 0. So B to C on 0. Okay, run ABA from B, A, B, A. You're coming back to A. Okay, so from B to A, there's a transition on 1, which is the inverse homomorphic image of ABA. Okay, and from C, you can see there are no transitions which you can make on AA and ABA. So no further transitions are being added to the finite automata. So this you have to do for every state. Remember, the set of states remains the same set of states, and you try to run these strings which have been defined in the homomorphism on for each of these states, and thus obtain the transitions in this new finite automata. So this is your final finite automata. But notice here one thing, that this B is actually an unreachable state. Okay, it is not a state which you can reach from the start state. So this B and the transitions from B actually you can neglect altogether. So what you have left is the remaining finite automata A to C on 1. There is only one string which you can accept. Okay, that is 1.
Hello, ma'am.
And that is, yes.
Ma'am, one confusion. Can I ask now?
Yes, please.
Ma'am, what if we are checking manually H0 and H1 if it's given a smaller string? What if we
Yes.
got a repetition like a star?
Like what? If we have a repetition like
A
which
star
one?
on something, a string like A
Oh,
star,
star.
ma'am,
No.
like ABA,
See,
ABA.
yes. Now remember, homomorphism, homomorphism is not substitution. Homomorphism is always replaced by a single string, not a set. So you cannot have star, right?
Okay, ma'am. Okay, got it.
Okay. So that is why we don't say inverse substitution. We are saying inverse homomorphism. Okay. So it will be a single strings only. Does that clear? Does that convince you?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Got
Okay.
it.
So no confusion there. So you can see here that actually the finite automata which we have is just states A and C with a single transition. Therefore, it can accept only the string 1. And you have already convinced yourself that the inverse homomorphic image is just 1. Okay. So this is now the construction. So B is an unreachable state and so may be removed. Now there is also an induction proof. And I think I'm going to skip this proof. I'm going to make the PPTs available so you can go through it. We have already lost some time. What I would like to do is extend. I hope today's class you will allow me to extend it a little. I would prefer to finish the decision properties part. Okay, so what are decision properties first of all? So we have looked at several operations, okay, like complement, reversal, union, intersection, difference, substitution, inverse homomorphism, etc. And we have seen how these are all closed under regular sets. Okay. Now we are going to look at some decision problems. What are decision properties or what are decision problems? Decision problem is taking a decision which is either yes or no. Okay, so any decision problem means you give some input, you ask some question, okay, that is the input, and you expect an answer which is either a categoric yes or no. Okay, so what are the possible decision problems with regular languages? So the decision problems are usually whether or not a given regular language is empty, whether or not it is infinite, whether or not these are the various decision problems to which you will answer either yes or no. Now let's just go over old ground, just a little bit of it. A language class is a set of languages, you know that, and languages can have two important categories of properties, decision properties and closure properties. We have already seen closure properties in great detail. Regular languages can be represented in many ways. You can have a regular expression or a finite automata. Okay. In fact, after some time, you will see that there is yet another representation we have not yet touched, that is using grammars. Okay, from the next class, I hope Shubhrajit sir will start with grammars, and you will see that grammars also can be used to represent these various languages. We'll come to that later. But also, you can represent a language by using like English-like statements. Okay, so let's say it's where n is a non-negative, so O as 0 and 1n where n is a non-negative integer, or the set of strings consisting of some number of zeros followed by same number of ones. This represents this set. Okay, so you can also represent a language like this. Now, a decision property for a class of languages is basically an algorithm that takes a formal description and tells you whether or not the property holds. So for example, we can ask the question, is the language L empty? We have defined a language L. Is it empty, or is there any string which can be accepted, which can be a member of that language? Okay. And representation is also important. I'm going a little fast, so we'll not read each of these. You will see these in the
Ma'am, are you saying something?
presentations. Okay. Yes.
Ma'am, I think you're not audible after you said you will see these in the.
You cannot hear me?
Ma'am, now we can hear you, ma'am. I think your voice got cut off in the middle, ma'am. That's what happened.
Okay. I don't think we have lost too much because of that.
Yes, ma'am.
Today we are facing a lot of network problems. Usually we do not do so. So use of closure properties often used to prove certain aspects of a language. Okay. This example also I'm going to skip. I think you won't have too much difficulty. It is with respect to intersection. Okay, can just go through it. So let's come to the various decision properties. First of all is the membership question. What is the membership question? Is string W in the regular language L? So you have been given two inputs. You have been given a regular language and a string, and you have to check whether or not W belongs to L. How would you do it? Okay. I think this is one of the simplest decision properties. You have the DFA and you run the string on the DFA and you decide accordingly. So this is how you run the string. I don't think you need to really describe that. If you end up in an accepting state, then you say that the string belongs to the language. If you do not end up in an accepting state, the string does not belong to the language. Yes, no, answer. Okay, we have already been doing this. What if the regular language is not represented by a DFA? That there also the answer is already known to you. You can always convert it to any representation you like. If you have been given a regular expression, you can convert it to a DFA. You can convert it to an epsilon NFA. If you have been given an epsilon FA, you get a DFA. And this conversions are all by now very familiar to you. Okay. So if we give the algorithm in terms of checking with a DFA, that is perfectly all right. Okay. Next problem. So first is the membership problem, membership decision. The next problem is the emptiness problem. You have been given a set, a regular set. A regular set has been described to you. Does this regular set have any string, or is it the empty set? Okay, this is the decision problem. You have to answer yes or no. Does the language contain any string at all? So let's assume again that the representation is a DFA. Construct the transition graph, that is nothing but the diagram. Okay. Compute the set of states which are reachable from the start state. So find out which are the states which are reachable from the start state. If any of the final states is reachable, then yes, you can accept some string because there's a path from the initial state to a final state, any final state. Okay, so if you can find a path, reachability checking is nothing but finding paths, searching for paths, right? So if you can find a path from the initial state to any final state, okay, then you say yes. If not, you say no. So how long do you keep checking? Suppose you find a path in a certain number of steps. Okay, very fine. You can always say yes. But can you really say no with any kind of confidence until you have checked all paths? When will you say that I have checked all paths and the path does not exist? If it is an algorithm, you should also be able to categorically say no. So when do you think you can say no? Have you any ideas? I'm sure you have studied some graph theory. Okay, so can you give me an answer with respect to the number of states in the finite automata? How many steps should you check before you can categorically say no? No ideas?
3 or 5, ma'am. I'm guessing now at this point. 3 or 5.
Why 3 or 5? I said I want an answer with respect to n, which is the number of states of the DFA. Think back to pumping lemma. It can be something like the pumping lemma. Okay. Suppose you look for paths in which no state repeats itself. Okay. So how many distinctly different states can you have in that path? How many distinctly different states can you have in a path in which no state repeats itself? I told you, think of pumping lemma. Obviously, you cannot have more than n number of states, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Right? So when you have checked all paths of length n in which the states do not repeat themselves, you have effectively checked the entire finite automata, all possible paths you have checked. You do not really need to check any further. So at that point, you can say that if I have not yet found a path which reaches a final state, then I'm not going to find it ever. Can you say that with any confidence? Is it possible that there is a longer path than n, okay, which can take you to a final state, but in which no state is repeating itself?
No, ma'am.
No, because there are the maximum number of different states you can have is n. So the path length will have to be n minus 1. So when you have checked all possible paths with non-repeating states up to length n minus 1, okay, and if you still do not find a path reaching a final state, then you can categorically say that no, the final states are not reachable and this set is an empty state. Okay. So that is why we call it an algorithm. Remember, this is the formal definition. Actually, of late, this term algorithm is being used very loosely. Any procedure, step-by-step procedure, often it is called an algorithm. But the algorithm has a mathematical definition also, the term algorithm. It has to have a step-by-step procedure in which, in a finite number of steps, you should be able to produce an definite answer and also a repeatable answer. For the same input, you should always produce the same output. So that is the definition of an algorithm. You won't call it an algorithm if you can say yes, but no, maybe, no, it is not like that. You have to be able to say yes and no categorically in a finite number of steps. Only then you can call it an algorithm. Okay, so there is an algorithm which can give a decision with regard to the emptiness problem in a finite automata. Okay, and the maximum number of steps is limited by the number of states of the DFA. Okay, and DFA representation, please remember, if we confine ourselves to DFA representation, we are not really losing out on the expressibility, because you know that DFAs can be converted to NFAs, or regular expression can be converted to DFA, and all these are interconvertible. Okay, so every regular set can be represented by a corresponding DFA. Okay. So this is it clear to you? Two decision problems we have seen already. One is the membership. Okay, because the number of states of a DFA are finite. It is there in the name itself. Okay, deterministic finite automata. This finite refers to number of states. So in a finite number of steps, we can check whether a string belongs to a language. Similarly, in a finite number of steps, we can check whether a given language, that is the DFA, accepts any string or not. If you can find a reachable final state, then it is non-empty. If you cannot find a reachable finite state, then it is empty. Okay. The next decision property is equivalence. The next decision property is equivalence. Actually, in equivalence, I like to give a simpler algorithm. You remember, we have seen how it is possible to obtain a minimalistic DFA or the minimal DFA for a given language. Okay. So what is the problem we are solving? We are given two different regular languages, L and M. Okay, they could have different representations also, but it is always possible to find a minimal DFA for these two languages. And if these two languages are equivalent, their minimal DFAs will be the same. So that is how you can check equivalence, because finding the minimal DFA, for that you have an algorithm. You have a step-by-step procedure which is with a finite number of steps. Okay, but it is also possible using a product DFA. And since you have already studied product DFAs, you should not have a difficulty in understanding this. So the algorithm involves constructing the product DFA from the DFAs for L and M, the two given languages for which you have been given DFAs, maybe not the minimal DFA every time. Okay, some other DFA also. You know that many different DFAs can be possible. So we have these two DFAs given. What we do is we create the product DFA. Let this DFAs have the set of states Q and R respectively. Okay, and the product DFA has set of states from Q, Cartesian product R, okay, Q cross R. And the sets are represented by pairs QR. This we have seen already. Now the start state is going to be the one which has the start states of both Q and R. So Q0, R0. And the transitions also, we have seen how transitions are defined in a product DFA. Okay. So basically both the DFAs we are simulating in lockstep fashion. Okay. Parallelly we are simulating both the DFAs. Okay. So this is the product DFA. We have seen this before. So the equivalence algorithm says make the final states of the product DFA be those states QR such that exactly one of Q and R is a final state of its own DFA. So when we are taking this QR, now make the final states such that one of the components is a final state and the other component is a non-final state. Okay, so what kind of strings are you accepting? The final states, you make those states which are a final state. One of the components is a final state in one DFA and a non-final state, other component is a non-final state in the other DFA. So if we go back to the example here, which are the states we are making a final state in this product DFA? So B here is a final state and C here is a final state. So B, C, we cannot make it a final state here. So we can make and AD, none of these are final states. So what we are going to do is we will make AC a final state, right? A is non-final, C is final. AD, we will not make it a final state. BD, we can make it a final state because B is final and D is non-final. So AC and BD, we are going to make them final states. Now tell me, what kind of strings will this DFA accept? Remember, the two DFAs we are simulating in parallel. Any ideas? Can you hear me? And my slides are also visible? Fine?
Ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. So please give me the answer. What do you think will be the strings which will be accepted if A, AC and BD become final states? Any ideas? So if AC is a final state, you can see that C here, component C here is final, but A is not final. Okay, so this state will accept those strings which are accepted by the second DFA but not by the first, right? And BD will accept those strings which are accepted by the first DFA but not the second. Okay, so here it is. Okay, so if we make AC and BD the final states, then we will accept those strings which are accepted by one of the DFAs but not the other. Is that right? Are you all convinced about this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so when we are simulating this product DFA by making AC and BD the final states, because one of the components is final, the other is non-final, so we will accept exactly those strings which is accepted by only one of the given input DFAs. That means which belongs in only one of the input languages but not the other, right? So you could say it is the union of the two sets minus the intersection of the two sets, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, okay. So the product accepts W if and only if W is in exactly one of L or M. It is either in L but not in M, or it can be in M but not in L. Now, if you find any strings of this kind which are accepted by this DFA, what does it tell you? What inference can you draw? If you can find a string which is now accepted by this product DFA which you see on the screen, what inference can you draw?
And that means it exists. That equivalence, it isn't equivalent in that case.
Yes, you are right. The two languages are not equivalent. Okay, so it is the no answer. If you can find a string, it is no. If you cannot find a string, it is yes, they are equivalent. Is this clear? Okay, so how are we deciding on equivalence? We can find a product DFA. We can make those states final which have one component final and the other non-final. Okay, now this product DFA is a finite automata which should accept strings which are in one of the languages but not in the other. Okay, so we have another language defined by this DFA. This language, if it is empty, that means the original two languages you were given, they are equivalent. This language, if it is non-empty, it means the previous two languages, the given input languages are equivalent. Or did I say just the opposite? Maybe one of you should repeat what inference we can derive. Nobody willing to volunteer? Okay, then I'll repeat myself. Now this product DFA,
Ma'am,
which
if it
we have
contains,
created.
ma'am,
Yes, carry on.
ma'am, if it contains any string, then we will be inferring that those will not be equivalent. If it's empty,
Yes.
then they are equivalent.
If it is empty, then it is equivalent. And you already have, remember, you already have an algorithm to check for emptiness. Okay, so what have you done? In finite number of steps, you have created this product DFA. Then in finite number of steps, you can check for emptiness of this product DFA. And depending on the result of your emptiness checking, you can give a yes, no answer for equivalence also. Okay?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, can you please explain the motive of doing the final step of the product DFA?
Which one? Which one? Which step?
Ma'am, like we are doing the AC and BD as final step of the product
Yes,
DFA.
yes.
Why?
Why we are making this a final? This if we make these the final states, then we have what we have done is we have created a DFA which will accept strings in one of the language but not the other. So we now have a DFA for the language in which strings belonging to any one but not the other are accepted. And now this language which we have defined, we can check for emptiness. Okay, we can, because we have an algorithm for checking emptiness, right? This algorithm for checking emptiness of this product DFA language will tell us whether the original two languages are equivalent or not. Is it clear now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Clear.
Okay, so that is the reason why we have it is we do not have anything to do with the language except checking for emptiness. Okay, since we have already defined a step-by-step procedure for checking emptiness by using that reachability checking, remember, here also you can do reachability checking. Okay, so in this case you can see that this final state is reachable because it has the empty string. Okay, so this is these two finite automata, even though they appear to accept the same string, they are not really equivalent. Okay, next, so this product DFA is empty if and only if L and M are equivalent, and we already have an algorithm to test whether the language of the DFA is empty. Okay, okay, so let's quickly come to the next decision property. I think this is the last one, that is containment. Given a regular language L, M, is L a subset of M? Is L contained in M? Okay, it could be a proper subset also. If it is a proper, if it is an exact overlapping, then it is actually equivalence checking. So you can say this is a special case of equivalence checking also. So the algorithm also uses the product automaton. So how do you define the final states of Q and R so that the product is of this language is empty if and only if L is properly contained in M? Okay, so you have the sets Q and R. If Q is a final state, that means for L, and it is not a final state for M. Okay, these states, if you make them final states, what they will accept is all those strings which are accepted by L but are not part of M. Okay, so let's see the product DFA. So now we have to look for states. So L and M, these are given here, and we have to find out whether L is contained in M, whether M is a superset of L or not. Okay, so we look for those states which are final for L but not for M. Okay, so final state of L is B and the non-final state of M is D. So BD, we are making this a final state. Okay, so now we have defined a DFA which will only accept strings which are part of L but not of M. And if you can find such a string, you can say that L is not contained in M. Okay, and if you find that this state is unreachable, that means this DFA defines an empty language, then you can say that L is contained in M. Is that clear? Okay, so this actually you can say it's a special case of equivalence. It is somewhat similar to equivalence, only it is we are interested in only strings that might be in L but not in M. Okay, so it's actually quite similar to equivalence. If you have understood equivalence, containment is not difficult. So final property, infiniteness. If is a given language infinite or not? Okay, so we start with a DFA. This is slightly different. Here we do not use a product automaton. So if the DFA has n states and the language contains strings of any string of length n or more, then the language is infinite. Now, why would you say this? How can you say this? Can anybody give me an idea? And again, I give you the
Yes,
hint.
ma'am. Yes,
Yes.
ma'am. Got it, ma'am.
Oh, you got it already? Before I
Yes,
give you the
ma'am.
hint.
No, ma'am. We can infer that there will be a repetition.
Yes.
Anyhow.
It's just like pumping lemma, right? If you have
Yes,
a length n or more, then some state is repeating. If there is some state repeating, there has to be a loop. And if there's a loop, you can traverse that loop infinite number of times. In that case, it will be an infinite language, a language with infinite number of strings. Okay. But if all your strings are smaller than n, then obviously it will be a finite language. So this, I think, pigeonhole principle, we have already done it. Let's see the proof. X, Y, Z. You can see we have seen this proof in pumping lemma. Okay, so X, Y, I, Z is in the language. And since I can be any number greater than equal to 0, you have infinite number of strings. But a simpler test is trying to find a cycle. Okay, so eliminate states which are not reachable from the start state. Eliminate states that do not reach a final state. So basically trim down your finite automata. Test if the remaining transition graph, that is your finite automata, has any cycles. Okay, for example, is this language finite or infinite? So you can remove these states. First of all, Q6 is not reachable from Q0 and Q5 is reachable from Q0, but from Q5 you cannot reach any final state. Okay, so you remove these states. Whatever you are left with, is there a cycle there? You can see that there is a cycle here on Q5, but since we are removing Q5 altogether, all the transitions coming into Q5 also are removed and the cycle goes. Okay, so there are no cycles and this is a finite language. This is a quick test. Okay, what about this language? Is there any state which we want to remove? Actually Q5 we can remove. Okay, but there's already is a cycle here. You can see there still is a cycle on Q3. Okay, so due to this cycle, it is an infinite language. Okay, so this is also another way of giving you a decision.
Ma'am, so we eliminate the states that cannot go to a final state.
We remove those states which cannot go to a final state because those are like dead states, right? Which are like sinks, and you will never accept a string. If you enter those states, you will never accept a string again.
Ma'am, one question. Q6 basically sends out as goes to Q0 on 0. And where does the input of 1 take Q6 to?
Actually, it's supposed to be on Q3. Actually, I think the diagram is not particularly good.
Okay, now got it.
It appears it's going to Q3, but you cannot reach Q6 by any means, starting from Q0. Yes, so it's unreachable. And also those states from which a final state is unreachable. Okay, so these two states are removed. In this case also Q5 is removed. And if you have a cycle there, okay, then, and remember, cycle does not necessarily always mean a self loop. It can also involve more than one state. A cycle, I'm talking of cycles, not loops. Okay, even though the example I'm showing is a simpler case where it's a direct loop. Okay, but cycle can involve multiple states, and you know there are several cycle detection algorithms in graph theory, which can be found in a finite number of states. Okay, so cycle detection can also tell you whether or not the set is going to be finite or infinite. Okay, so I think we stop here. I've already exceeded my time quite a bit. This brings us basically to the end of properties of regular languages. I'll be putting up these PPTs on the Moodle website, okay, course website in Moodle. Have you been able to access other PPTs which I have put there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and next class I think Shubhrajit sir will take over and he'll be discussing context-free grammars. Okay, so thank you all for attending. Thank you all for bearing with my network problems, and we might bring the class to an end here.